welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 294. I think that's my lucky number. For the 8th of June 2014, Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. Coming up on this week's show, we're going to kick off with Eran Segev, and not at QED this time, but at Skepticamp in Manchester. And Eran will give those people, and you of course, an oversight, a rundown, a look into, a peep into the goings-on and the story, some of the story behind the Australian Skeptics. After that, it's a week in science from our good friends at the Royal Institution of Australia, who do a wonderful job, RiAus.org.au. And then I interview Theo Clark from Brisbane. Theo Clark has written the second version of a book called Humbug. Now, this is all about logical fallacies and mistakes and arguments and things, you know, like the argument from antiquity and the argument from celebrity and the straw man argument and the false dichotomy. All those things are explained in detail in Theo's book Humbug, which is a guide to spotting fallacies and deceptive arguments. You can get Humbug online if you go to www.skepticsfieldguide.net and download that book for only a couple of dollars, I think, and whack it onto your mobile device, your iPad or your Google Pad or whatever pads you have these days. And I must say, I find it an invaluable resource. We'll find out more about Humbug coming up later on in the show. And to round off the show, I'm off to Skeptics in the pub here in Sydney, where I just sort of, chat to people. That's about sums it up, I guess. I just run around with my microphone and just chat to people about why they've come to Skeptics in the pub and how you too, if you're in the Sydney area, you can be involved in Skeptics in the pub and even give a talk. And that's to round off the show. And those people in Canberra, my friends, those Canberra Skeptics, they're never not busy. On the 12th of June, there's another talk coming up. Stop blaming open access. What's wrong with scholarly communication? If you're interested in that sort of talk, or you're in the Canberra area and you want to find out more about the local skeptical scene under the presidency of Lauren Cochrane, run to canberraskeptics.org.au. Always something going on with the Canberra Skeptics. I certainly take my hat off to them. But of course, they're not the only active skeptics around the country. There's also the Mordiallic Skeptics down just south of Melbourne. You can find them at Meetup, Mordi, M-O-R-D-I, Skeptics. Check them out. And don't forget, coming up next month is Skepticamp. Skepticamp in Brisbane. Actually, there's a little bit more information about that coming up somewhere in today's show. Now, for you people who subscribe to the Skeptic magazine, it's in the post. I've been told it's in the post as we speak, but of course, if you subscribe to the digital copy, I'm sure you're sitting back and enjoying your magazine. Well, I hope you're taking out time to listen to the Skeptic Zone and then get straight back to the magazine where you can read a report by Joe Alabaster, a report by me about the paranormal convention, and all sorts of other goodies. If you want to subscribe to the Skeptic magazine, and I sincerely hope you do, just go to skeptics.com.au/publications to find out more. There's even an article by Heidi Robinson from the Northern Rivers Vaccination Supporters. northernriversvaccinationsupporters.org. Hello, Heidi. Hello, Charlie. Hello, Hugo. But for now, it's time for me to... Oh, hello. Hello, Fred. Are you going to meow for the people this week? No, he's going to run away instead and sit down. Typical cat. But for now, I'm going to run downstairs, give Fred the cat a pat on the head on the way, open up the fridge, get out that waffle mix, make myself up a batch of waffles with maple syrup, and while I'm doing that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
salt. Grain of salt.
Let's all take this with a grain of salt. Here's Eran Segev.
Grain of salt now. Grain of salt. You gotta take it with a...
First, I want to build on something that Marsh said about Hack Day. We in Australia had something similar a few years ago. We did it. Marsh said he wanted to do it in London because it's easy to get to and the population density. We chose a spot that is about halfway between Sydney and Melbourne and equally difficult to get to for both of those cities. So, just to make sure that nobody's offended. So, Australian Skeptics, first of all, a bit of a primer on Australian Skeptics. Australian Skeptics is not a single organization. There is an organization called Australian Skeptics Inc. That is the group in New South Wales, the group that I belong to and was the former president of. We are the de facto national body, but we are not the only ones, and we do work in collaboration with groups across the various states and territories in Australia. When I speak about Australian Skeptics, I'm not speaking just about the organisation in New South Wales called Australian Skeptics, although it's primarily about that, but I'm speaking about all of those different groups and also just skeptics in Australia who collaborate with us and work closely with us. So we try to do as much as possible the opposite of armchair skepticism. We try to be active and actually do things that achieve results. And I want to talk to you about a few things that we've done in recent years, just to give you a bit of a flavour of the kind of things that we do. So the first thing I want to mention is the story of Ken Harvey. Dr. Ken Harvey, some of you will have heard of him. He's a professor, now retired professor of public health, who is a serial complainant to the TGA, which is the equivalent of the FDA. I'm not sure what it is in the UK. But basically it's the organization, the government organization that controls medicine. And he complains to them about all kinds of quacks and quackery. And he complained about this company called SensorSlim, who was selling a slimming solution. That's some spray that is supposed to work in your sleep. Now, he complained about them based on the available laws. They sued him. They sued him for defamation. While the whole process of the TGA is extremely slow, it's a very, very weak organization in Australia, unfortunately. And during the process of the TGA working on the complaint, SensorSlim took a sledgehammer to Ken Harvey and tried to silence him by suing him. When we heard about this, what we did was we went on a huge public campaign to raise funds for his defense. And the idea was that Ken Harvey must not be a single cent out of pocket for that kind of thing, because that would send the wrong message to quacks out there that they can silence people like Ken, who's there's a guy, a comic, who said that Ken Harvey is our regulatory system. He's responsible for the fact that there is some level of control of quackery in Australia. So we made a point of making sure that his expenses were covered. And we actually had pledges in about 3 weeks. We had pledges of about $25,000. And of those $25,000, $24,600 were actually paid. So these were just pledges. But basically everybody who pledged actually paid in the end, which was a great success. In the end, Ken's costs were something like $42,000, and I think we raised from the public something like $37,000 or $38,000, and we as Australian Skeptics paid the rest, and we just made sure that he was not out of pocket. And of course, we made a big deal out of it to send a very strong message that we are not going to allow people like SensorSlim, who were backed, by the way, by a very notorious conman, Peter Foster, which some of you will have heard of because he was related to. Had some hanky-panky with Cherie Blair and housing and something. I'm not sure exactly all the details, but he's a known conman. He was behind this thing. And the great thing was that we had a convention in 2011 we got Ken Harvey, somebody from Consumer Watchdog, the government Consumer Watchdog, somebody from the TGA, a senior guy from the TGA, the head of the TGA, all on stage together in a panel. And the day before that conference, before that panel, Peter Foster was arrested, especially for our conference. It was very difficult to arrange, but we did. A few other things that we've done. AVN is the Australian Vaccination Network. We have been working there's been a collaboration of Australian Skeptics and lots of other groups, most notably a group called Stop the AVN, SAVN. Stop the Australian Vaccination Network is just a group of concerned citizens. Many of them are also members of Australian Skeptics, who decided that this organisation needed to be stopped. And it just so happened that this group and us started working in parallel pretty much at the same time, about 4 years ago now, to stop that organisation. So we published in some major newspapers in Australia a letter about this AVN and urging parents to take the information that they need about vaccinations, not from the AVN, but from reputable sources like the government, like their GPs, to make sure that they actually make the right decision. On the same day that our ad went in the papers, a wonderful man by the name of Ken McLeod sent a very well-crafted complaint to the HCCC, which is the Healthcare Complaints Commission in New South Wales, which is the organisation that investigates complaints about health services providers. He sent a very well-crafted complaint to them that was investigated for a very long time. It's a long story, I won't go into the whole story, but that was basically, that day was the beginning of 3.5, 4 years of very, very bad time for the AVN. One of the major things that we've achieved, in my opinion, is not just the fact that they've been, for the past 3.5, 4 years, they've been very, very busy dealing with complaint after complaint about every little thing they do. They just haven't had time to do what they really want to do, which is harm public health. The major thing we did was we made a change in the way the media perceives the anti-vaccination network. Instead of being the go-to guys to any information about vaccines, and the ones that they go to provide that false balance, around vaccines. You invite a pediatrician and some mum from Bangalore, New South Wales, who has, as she describes it, has a brain. So do cockroaches. Small, but so instead of speaking to them as vaccine experts, they're now referred to universally in the press, anywhere in the media, as the anti-vaccine lobby. And that is a huge achievement for us, because that means that when parents go to their website, when parents hear about them, they already know that these are not people that you can get credible information from. Of course, if somebody is inclined that way and somebody wants anti-vaccine information, of course they'll find it, but at least they know what they're getting. With a name like Australian Vaccination Network, it sounds like the information you get from them is credible. And only in the last couple of weeks, they were ordered by the government, by the New South Wales government, to change their name. Unfortunately, they changed their name to Australian Vaccination Skeptics Network, which is not a fantastic thing for us, obviously, because it could create a semblance of a link, and we have been fighting them for a long time. But we've thought about it, and we've talked to people outside of the community to try to understand what the perception is of that. And most people say, yeah, that appears like they're against vaccines. And that's what we really want. I mean, we'll worry about the name and the word skepticism later, but right now we're sending a very good message out there that they need to change their name. In parallel to that, they're also being investigated by the government on several infringements, financial infringements. The information that they spread around vaccines is deemed illegal. They have to change. There was a big report about information that appears on their website, and basically on every single item, it ended with remove and never put back this information. So there's not going to be much left on the website after they implement this. And the organisation, the HCCC, the organisation that put out that report, was so confident that they're not going to comply that they've already phrased in the report, they've phrased the public warning that they're going to put up after this doesn't work. Health funds. So there is a problem in Australia. In Australia, there's Medicare, which is it's public. It's a public health service. So we all pay for it through our taxes, and you can go to the GP for free or almost for free. You get a lot of medication subsidized. In addition, a lot of people have public health insurance, and that public health insurance is partially paid for by the public through a rebate that the health funds receive from the government. Now, what's my time like? I don't.
5:30.
Okay. So the those health funds get some money from the government. Unfortunately, those health funds also provide insurance that covers things like chiropractic and homeopathy and all kinds of massage therapies. Some of them are actually okay, but some of them are really not. And that is something that we, for a long time, been trying to get the health funds to provide at least as, make it optional. Don't give it to me. I don't want to use that. Don't put chiropractic on my insurance. I'm not going to use it. And basically they said, look, it's going to cost you more to have your own custom policy. So it hasn't been working very well. Fortunately, because of the fact that the public pays for these services, the government got onto it, and we've been able to get the organization called NHMRC, National Health and Medical Research Council, to investigate. And together they've come up with a list of services that the health funds cannot provide funds to. And this whole thing is not yet finished. There is an interim determination, but it's not yet complete. But you can be sure that chiropractic is not going to be there, that homeopathy is definitely not going to be there. There's going to be a lot of other things that are not going to be there. Another thing, since I've mentioned the NH and MRC, I want to mention that they've investigated homeopathy, and only a couple of days ago came up with a scathing paper about homeopathy. Yes, absolutely. It basically says it doesn't work. Just like a website that how does homeopathy work? How does homeopathy work? Yeah. One last thing I want to mention is that we've done some research into universities teaching all modes of quackery, and unfortunately there was quite a lot of that. Some universities were worse than others, but it was quite common for universities to offer all kinds of courses in quackery. Now, there's this constant argument about whether quackery or alternative medicine should be researched, and absolutely it should be researched, but it should not be taught before it's researched. And I think the problem is that in a lot of those universities, it's not the research program that's the problem. It's the teaching of things that do not have a foundation in science or foundational evidence that is the problem. For example, RMIT University they have a very large faculty of chiropractic, and as part of that faculty, they have a children's chiropractic clinic. So their students treat kids with chiropractic, which is very disturbing. Now, we've done that research, and that research was published in 2 parts in our magazine, The Skeptic, and which is the second oldest skeptical magazine in the world. It's been published since 1980. And as a result of that, several prominent health professionals have established an organization called Friends of Science in Medicine. They call it FSM, and they're too old to realize that that's going to be a problem for them. But anyway, they've established this organization, and now this organization has something like 1,200 members, and those members are largely health professionals, scientists, public health advocates, and all of those people are now a fairly large and influential group of people who will push the government to make the right decisions. They write letters. First of all, they appear. All of them have all kinds of titles from the Governor General, not quite knighthood, but somewhere on the lower rung. We are a monarchy in Australia. You do know that, right? So they're quite prominent people, all of them, and they have access to the press. They have access to the government, and they actually make quite a lot of difference. And we do see how they're able to. Through their contacts with the universities, to actually make a difference. It is now at a stage where most universities are really hesitant when it comes to teaching all kinds of modes of alternative medicine, to the point where the largest chiropractic program in Australia, in terms of the number of students going through it at Macquarie University in Sydney, they've decided to dispose of it. Actually, they've sold the program to some other university, a lower-end university. They've obviously had what was it that they said? That the reason was the research outputs. They have to focus on research output of other programs. But the reality is that if it's research output, that program should have been scrapped a long time ago, because the research output of the chiropractic program is basically nil over the 30 years that they've had it at Macquarie University. The one last thing I want to mention about Australian Skeptics is not about something that we do, but about our approach. I mentioned earlier, it's not armchair skepticism, it's about activism, it's about getting things done, it's about where we can be most effective. Definitely try to avoid political games within the organization and between us and other groups, and it's been working fairly well. Thank you very much.
Has anyone got any questions for Eran? I'm going to bring Eran. Is that about right? Eran?
It's fine, don't worry.
Any questions for this gentleman?
Eran.
How fast are your numbers increasing overall in all the organisations? So, are you attracting more people to skepticism?
We're definitely seeing more people at our events. So it is growing, and more importantly, we're seeing a lot more of the younger generation at our events. It's not reflecting in membership though. Our membership is basically a subscription to the magazine, and that's actually not growing in any significant ways. So, but we're definitely seeing a lot of people. Skeptics in the pub, we regularly get, say, in Sydney, 50 to 80 people. That's the regular number, and that's just in Sydney. There's the equivalent in other cities. About half the people are not subscribers, are not members of the organisation. Look, we would prefer that they were, but that's not. The important thing is that they're active and interested.
I've got another question down there.
I don't know if everybody's aware, but the Australian Skeptics are one of the best organised and the best activists in the skeptic community as a whole. UK Skeptics, Merseyside Skeptics, Edinburgh Skeptics, amazing job, you guys. I'm watching from America, everything you do. And I just want to point out that this is just a fabulous organization. Please just spend some time with him and learn from him, and vice versa, so that you guys get as much information as you can from these amazing people. The Skeptic Zone podcast is a wonderful resource run by Richard Saunders, and I was hoping maybe you could just mention really quickly if there are other podcasts that maybe people could be listening to get that feel of what's going on in Australia.
Hey, come to us.
No, I couldn't really. I must admit that because of my, I actually have this thing called job. Yeah, work is a four-letter word. By the way, I don't usually like comments in this, but I like that one. So no, I think the Skeptic Zone will definitely. It's almost the official podcast of Australian Skeptics, and definitely you will know about everything that we do if you listen to the Skeptic Zone podcast. And I will be speaking to many of you on record during this weekend for the Skeptic Zone podcast. And you can subscribe to a digital. Sending a print version is actually quite expensive, but it's possible to get a digital subscription to our magazine, and where you will also learn a lot about what we do. And we have a website that's quite active, and we always have news there and stories about what we do.
I'll leave it there and move on to today's time now. Okay. Thank you very much.
Grain all sold now. Grain all sold. You gotta take it with us.
Hello, dear skeptical ninjas. My name is Jake Farwharton.
And my name is Ross Bulge.
And we are here to talk to you about Bris Skepticamp, which is coming up in July. So who is speaking at Bris Skepticamp?
Well, Jake, you and I will be there as hosts.
As hosts?
And also recording a podcast.
A podcast?
Right. And we've got John Cook from skepticalscience.com.
Wow.
We've got Theo Clark, who does Hunting Humbug podcast, and also the Skeptics Field Guide.
That is amazing.
And Loretta Maron from Friends of Science and Medicine.
That is fantastic.
And if all of that sounded too amazing, we have a whole host of local skeptics from the Brisbane area.
So if I call now, do I also get a free set of steak knives?
Well, I would be quite sceptical of that claim, Jake.
So how can I find out more about Bris Skepticamp?
You can go to brisskepticamp.com skepticamp.org.
That was an advantageously made web domain name, I dare say.
Yes.
And when is Briz Skeptic Camp?
July 19th this year.
So July 19th this year, and it's free.
It's completely free.
Completely free?
Yeah.
With a free set of steak knives as well?
I would continue to be sceptical.
So go to brizskepticamp.org right now.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. June the 6th, 1944, was D-Day, the Allied invasion of Europe, and they had a little bit of science and technology on their side. A whole range of modified tanks were developed for specific jobs during D-Day and the later invasion of Europe. Known as Hobart's Funnies, they included the Crocodile, a tank with a flamethrower instead of a machine gun. AVRE, or Armoured Vehicle Royal Engineers, had a heavy mortar on board capable of firing an 18-kilo projectile filled with high explosives around 137 metres. There were tanks that laid a canvas road to prevent following vehicles from getting bogged, others that carried bundles of poles to instantly fill in ditches, tanks that carried a 9-metre bridge in front of them, and even a drive-over tank with extendable ramps fore and aft that could be driven into a hole to provide a road for other traffic. The science of deception was crucial to the success of the D-Day landings. 3 separate operations were mounted that created false impressions of invading armadas. Squadrons of bombers flying 2 split-second schedules dropped strips of aluminium foil in patterns that exploited a weakness in the German radar network. The foil would show up on the enemy screens as huge advancing fleets of ships that didn't exist. These deceptions were backed up by a small flotilla of boats carrying radio sets that created the volume of radio traffic expected from an invading fleet. At least one of these 3 operations appears to have fooled the Germans into preparing for an attack that never happened. And now, 4 fast facts about D-Day science and technology. Large gliders, known as Hamilcars, carried heavy payloads including small tanks. They had a wingspan of 33.5 metres and weighed almost 6.5 tonnes. Distinctive black and white stripes were painted on all Allied aircraft to make them readily recognisable so they wouldn't be shot down by Allied forces. Dummies dressed in full paratrooper uniforms, known as Ruperts, were dropped with real paratroopers east of the invasion zone to create the illusion of a large airborne attack, and invading troops were all issued with condoms, but they were used to keep water out of rifle barrels. That's it for this A Week in Science. For more information on D-Day science and technology, go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter @RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Paul Willis, and we'll catch you here next week.
Hi, I'm Finn. And I'm Rebecca, and we're the Skepticons. Skepticons is an Irish podcast by the Dublin Skeptics Society. It takes a conversational, reverent look at science, news and skeptical topics from an Irish perspective. You can find us at www.theskepticons.com.
You're always sparing with your strong finance.
And joining me now from Brisbane, sunny Brisbane, it's Theo Clark. Hello, Theo.
G'day, Richard. How are you going?
I'm doing really well, and I'm very excited and very pleased to see that you are releasing another edition of the book Humbug, which I first came across some years back. Humbug, the Skeptic's Field Guide to Spotting Fallacies and Deceptive Arguments. Now, let's go right back to the beginning. You wrote the first edition with your dad, who's sadly no longer with us. What inspired you two to put this together?
Look, so it began really, my father was an academic in teacher education at Griffith University, and we have obviously had a long-standing interest in skepticism and critical thinking and things like that, and one of the things he'd noticed in student essays was they were able to critique educational articles and things like that probably intuitively. So lots of times people sense that an argument is flawed or wrong or there's some issue with it, but they can only really go at it superficially and can't identify exactly where an argument's gone wrong or how it's been misrepresented. So he'd obviously had an interest in critical thinking through his studies and his work, and we'd gradually started to look at teaching fallacies as a way to approach critical thinking, because when you can learn how to identify flawed reasoning, you can then point it out in other people's reasoning, but also then remove it from your own and therefore structure a better argument or make your point better. So that's where the genesis of the book began.
It's very good because it happens to us all, but I think from a skeptic's point of view, skeptics seem to be on the wrong end of these sort of things many times. Sometimes, I must admit, from people who don't know better, and this book would help everybody in that respect. But some of the arguments skeptics will get again and again and again. One of my favourite, of course, is the straw man argument.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really important one. And I would argue that's probably the most fundamental fallacy that's seen with skeptics in the media, anywhere in general, is a straw man, and not necessarily deliberately. Obviously, it can be done deliberately, but a straw man is when you essentially characterize your opponent's argument, but you essentially do a caricature of your opponent's argument. And if you're interested in seeking the truth as opposed to winning an argument, you will actually try to understand your opponent's argument perfectly. And if you're interested in winning, you'll characterize your opponent's argument in a flawed way, so it's easy for you to knock it down. So that's the straw man fallacy, and that's the distinction I make, is if you're interested in the truth and your opponent is wrong, you don't need to make a caricature of their argument. You can just explain their argument perfectly and then explain why it's wrong.
Yeah, yes, that's right. One of the ones that was put to me once on national television was, you skeptics thought the world was flat, therefore you're so silly.
I remember that. I believe I saw that show. And, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's not what skeptics think. It's about the process so of course, you change your mind. So if evidence comes along to force you to change your mind, then that's what you do. And if you're not married to the outcome, but you're married to the process of, thinking scientifically, thinking critically, then you don't mind when you have to change your mind. It's exciting, it's interesting, it's new. The issue is when you have a belief and you want to maintain that belief, so then you rationalize that belief. And of course, we all do it to some extent, but if you're aware of these cognitive biases, these flaws, you can do your best to try and avoid that.
And I see in the book too, you cover some other old favourites. And speaking of old favourite, we have the argument from antiquity, or I guess you could say the argument from tradition, the argument from celebrity, which is if some famous person says so, it sort of tends to add weight to an argument for whether that argument is valid or not. But I noticed one which tickled me a little bit, and I can't remember because I don't have it handy, the original copy, the Wtf Fallacy. Can you tell me about that one?
So that is a new one, so it wasn't in the first edition, and so to anyone who only has a copy of the first edition, I'll point out we have a bunch of extra new fallacies, and I personally rewrote every single sentence of the new second edition. So apologies if you got the first, but you really need to upgrade to the second edition. Because the first edition was really basically rubbish compared to this new one. The WTF, it really, obviously it's not a technically a logical fallacy in terms of the stricter sense of the word logic, but it's come about really because of the age of the internet. And what, I'm sure everyone here who's listening to the podcast has noticed is you get engaged in these long discussions on the internet with people that when you take a step back and think about it, people like Mike Adams, from Natural News and people like that, you're not going to win with them. They are possibly diagnosably certifiable in terms of, their mental health. So the WTF almost is a way to say, look, this person there's no point in engaging with them because they really are off the deep end. So it is kind of an ad hominem, but in a way it's almost to break and to say to yourself, let's just stop this. There's no point with it. So we, in our website, skepticsfieldguide.net, we catalogue a few of these that we've come across, and that's where it really come from. It's almost a more extreme version of simple-minded certitude, where this person is actually a bit of a loon. So maybe you should take a step back, and what's the point in engaging with them?
It's an interesting angle to take, because I'll have to say that there are times when I come across people who engage in argument with me, and the process breaks down relatively soon, because they're, to be blunt, incoherent a lot of the time, or their own arguments contradict each other and they can't see it because they're sort of living in their own fantasy world. And it's a tricky one, because you don't want to come off as appearing really arrogant and saying, I can't talk to this person, they're obviously completely bonkers. But I must admit, sometimes I think I found that to be the case.
Yeah, and that again is the point of it. I mean, you don't want to... I've had people email me saying, is this a WTF? And I've responded and said, well, you really need to take a step back and make sure you're not just, ending a conversation prematurely and just insulting them. It really does need to be the point where you say, as you said, their own issues and points are so incoherent and self-contradictory that you think, well, we would have to step back to first principles of logic and reason, and they'd have to accept all those things. So some of the examples we've used in the book, are real examples. So when Madonna was talking about her wanting to, help the world with nuclear waste, but what's the point with it? Because, if she writes all these great songs and there's no world, then what's the point in writing all these songs? And, things like the Richard Dawkins' fantastic documentary, Enemies of Reason, and there's a woman talking about 12 strands of DNA in Atlantis, et cetera, and you just go, it's so incoherent. You're taking DNA, then Atlantis, and all these different things, and there's literally no point in engaging with her.
Yes, and that can lead to very interesting situations when then you're accused of not engaging with people from a different point of view, and what are you scared of, skeptic, and why don't you argue with this person? And you're head desking away.
Yeah, life's too short, basically. That's what it is. And it's that internet meme of, I can't go to bed now because someone's wrong on the internet.
Yeah.
And you just go, well, actually, it's not worth investing in that time and effort.
And your travels, when you're talking with people, what is the most common fallacy people would innocently fall into?
Look, again, I'd have to say a couple that I really do notice is, false dichotomy. So people often will say, if we do this, then we can't do that, or, black and white thinking.
Yeah.
Certainly the misuse of information, so misusing science in particular, is one that, personally my background is as a physics teacher, so that one really just drives me up the wall. And I certainly say moving the goalposts. So in a conversation and a discussion or an argument, people will start to get off topic pretty quickly and shift the goalposts. So they're probably some of the big ones that I see. Obviously, just in terms of people's cognitive biases, so things like observational selection, that kind of stuff as well, are some of the ones that I commonly see, even with perhaps some of my colleagues, but that will remain nameless.
I do see those ones. I also see the argument from authority used quite a lot. So-and-so said this, therefore, it carries a lot of weight because so-and-so said this.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of, and obviously appeal to celebrities, one of the ones that really has come onto in the fore in the last decade or so. Obviously, people like Jenny McCarthy and those kind of people have done a lot of damage too. So that's a real worry. The other one, it's a kind of a new one, and I hadn't seen really out there, was what I like to phrase as an argument from imagination.
I saw that in the book. Yeah, that's a new one. Yeah.
Again, because there hadn't really been anything out there where people, they come up with an idea about the way the world works, and then they propose a hypothesis, and then they just assume that hypothesis is true, and they don't actually go and find any evidence for it. The hypothesis might make sense, but essentially, really, it's just saying, in my imagination, I think this is how the world works. And I looked around to try and find a fallacy that related to that, and the only thing I could find was the opposite, the argument from personal incredulity, when they said, well, I can't imagine how that could work. So there's really the opposite version, where if I can imagine how it works, then that is the way it works. And again, if you take a step back and think about it, it's almost like begging the question.
Yeah.
But begging the question has a very particular form. So that was another one that I thought is a useful way of categorizing some of the types of weak arguments people make.
I think begging the question too is a really important one that people should bear in mind, because again, from a skeptical point of view, being a skeptic out there and hearing people's points of view, so often in my experience, people will beg the question when they say to me, something like, well, Mr. Skeptic, I always know where they're coming from when they say Mr. Skeptic. They say, Mr. Skeptic, what about all the people who have seen ghosts? Or what about the time, what do you say to a little girl who sees a ghost every night? It happens so frequently, this begging the question, and I think it's a really important one people should understand.
At least they're being polite by calling you Mr. Skeptic, so I've got to give them that. Yeah, and again, I mean, that's a really good classic example of that burden of proof fallacy as well, where they say, well, if you can't prove that it's not ghosts, it must be ghosts. Then you say, well, hang on a second, where does the burden lie? The burden actually lies with the person making the claim. So if their claim is essentially eyewitness testimony, and they really just haven't done the research or the reading about, well, how valid is eyewitness testimony in terms of hallucinations and things like that. So all those phenomena can be explained by our understanding of modern psychology and the research. You know, we read people like Richard Wiseman and those guys, and you get a pretty clear picture of an alternative hypothesis that probably has more weight. And that's another thing we added to the second edition of the book is some of those tools for skeptical thinking, some of those ones that Carl Sagan talked about, such as spinning another hypothesis. And that claim you get made by those people, how can you explain this? Well, of course I can't explain it. I wasn't there. I didn't see it.
Yeah.
So, but it's almost put forward as like, well, therefore I win. And it's like, well,
absolutely.
Hang on, your explanation breaks all the laws of physics. So your explanation, a little bit more challenging to actually uphold.
It happens again and again. People, there's a guy at the moment with his UFO videos online dealing with the skeptics, and his basic premise is, well, you can't tell what it is, therefore I win.
Yeah, I mean, and so that's the classic burden of proof. And if we have ruled out every other possibility, and that's the only one that's left over, fair enough. But I don't think we've ruled out every other possibility.
Yeah, that's right. So, Theo, how can people get their hands on a copy of this book, which is an e-book, by the way, so people can certainly easily read it on their tablets and so on? What's the best place people can go to?
Look, the best place is just to go to the website, www.skepticsfieldguide.net, and there's a link that says ebook. And the choice of platforms at the moment are on Kindle, Google Play Books, and also Lulu. The Lulu version is a DRM-free EPUB, so if you prefer to have a DRM-free, so digital rights management free version, it's there. The original first edition is freely available as a scan, because I sent it into Google Books and they scanned it, and I've made the entire thing free. So if you just want a free copy of the first edition, you can grab that. But as I said, I have rewritten every single sentence painstakingly. So I'd get the ebook. It's only $3.99. I am investigating doing some print on demand to make a paperback version, because I've already had a couple of people say they'd like a paperback version. So I'll certainly let you know when that happens. We've also relaunched the podcast. So that's the other thing that's happened. I did a podcast with my father, Jeff, and I'm relaunching it probably every fortnight. The purpose of it is to go through every single fallacy in the book. Included in that will be some of the original episodes. I'm into splicing them in there with my dad, Jeff, because I think it's a good tribute to him.
Sure.
And also the original is archived, but you can't access it via a podcast app. So that's another thing I'm doing as well. Excellent.
Well, there you go, folks. The book is Humbug, the Skeptics' Field Guide to Spotting Fallacies and Deceptive Arguments. It's like the handbook I think every skeptic should have on their device or about them. It's good to read it at least once a year to refresh yourself on all these interesting ways that people can use bad arguments. And being a skeptic, you're going to come across bad arguments all the time. Theo, really nice to catch up with you, and all the best with the book and the podcast.
Excellent. Thanks, Richard, and thanks for the opportunity to have a chat to you about fallacies. I'm happy to do it anytime.
Are you enjoying the Skeptic Zone podcast and wondering where you can find more skeptical information? Skeptics on the Net is an online directory for everything skeptical. It features listings for skeptical podcasts, blogs, people, local groups, and more. It also includes the SOTN blog, where people in the know write introductions to their favorite skeptical and pseudoscientific topics. Please visit skepticsonthe.net.
And now join me as I go to Sydney Skeptics in the Pub, always on the first Thursday of each month at the Crown Hotel in the city. You can find out more by going to www.meetup.com facebook.com/AUST-Skeptics. Well, the talk's all over, folks. We had a great talk tonight about morality and God. Good heavens, what an interesting talk. And I was delighted to see lots of new faces here at Skeptics in the Pub tonight. Hello, new face.
Hi, I'm Isa.
Thank you for coming along to Sydney Skeptics in the Pub.
It's great. This is the first time I've ever been here, and I have to say that the speaker was amazing. I think
very deep, wasn't it? Philosophy,
all that nerdy stuff. But yeah, it was great. It's, I think, very stimulating, and it gives you something really meaty to chew on and think about.
That's one way to say it, I must admit. And we're always keen to know, how did you find out about Sydney Skeptics in the Pub?
Actually on the meetup group. Yes, right, and I've been on the meetup group for almost a year, but I've never come before because most of my master's classes are on Thursday nights.
Master's classes? Yeah. Oh, what's that in?
Communications management, whatever that means.
Okay, whatever that means. Now, you've got a very lovely accent there. Where are you from?
I'm from Malaysia.
Malaysia? Oh, and you're living in Australia or just studying?
I'm just...
Or both, I guess.
It's not either or.
Well, let me put it another way. Have you moved here or are you just here for the study?
I want to move here permanently, yes. We're working on it.
Well, of course you do. It's a wonderful place to be.
It is much better than, at least in terms of civil liberties, much better than Malaysia.
Well, that I can't comment on because I've never been to Malaysia. I went to Singapore briefly, but I've never been to Malaysia. I guess it's a nice place to visit, though.
It's a great place to visit, especially if you're the right race.
Oh dear.
Yeah. So I think there's many good things about it, but there also, as I say, in terms of civil liberties, there's some things that are lacking in our society.
Oh, I'm sure our Malaysian listeners will be very interested to hear that. We have another new, I think, have you been here before or this is your first time?
First time. This is my first time here.
And how did you discover us?
Well, I'm a long-time listener. I've listened to your very first Skeptic Zone podcast.
So you're the man who listened to my first...
That's me. And, I've lived in Coffs Harbour, still do, but I recently got work in Sydney.
Right.
And I'll be here for about 12 months or so, and this is the first opportunity I've had to come to one of the meetings. It's like coming home.
Yeah, I'm pleased you're here. Coffs Harbour. I used to live on the far north coast of New South Wales myself when I was growing up, so I know Coffs Harbour. It's a lovely place. It's Big Banana, right?
The Big Banana, that's right. Yeah. Every April 1st there's an article in the paper where the banana was taken away for the weekend. Bit sceptical, but great place to live. Great climate.
Yeah.
Great climate.
I'm pleased you've come along tonight, and I hope you had a good night.
I had a wonderful night. Great speech. Fantastic.
I think so too. I'm not sure what's on next month. I won't be here myself. I'll be in the United States on my way to the amazing meeting. But I've already promised the organizer, Jessica over there, that I'll be speaking on the one after that.
Okay, that's great. I'll be here for the next one and the one after.
Not sure what I'm going to say, but I'm sure I'll find out. I'll find something to talk about. Well, thank you both for coming along.
Thank you.
Goodness me, it's Anna Grady from the Blue Mountains. Hello.
Hello, Richard Saunders. How are you?
You travel down from the Blue Mountains every month for this.
Yes, I'm very committed.
In the train?
Yes, the train's great.
It's not bad, is it?
No, it's very comfortable.
And what do you like about Sydney Skeptics in the Pub?
Oh, okay. Well, I like the variety of speakers and the like-minded people and getting to know wonderful people like you, Richard.
Come on the show anytime. And it's a great pity that our dear friend Jo Alabaster's not well at the moment.
No, I think she's got a bit of a cold.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
But she also normally makes the journey down from the Blue Mountains.
In fact, she's probably a big reason why I go down. Having a bit of company on the train and, making a bit of a friend outing, it's great.
Yeah. Well,
the other thing I really like about it is the fact that you're not economically bound. There's no entry price. You don't have to eat or drink if you're here.
If you don't want to.
No. So it's really accessible and open to everybody.
I'll let you in a secret.
Oh.
If you go downstairs and put $1 in the poker machines, you can nibble their cheese and biscuits.
Is it worth $1?
Yeah. You get a bit of entertainment.
And the sadness.
And the sadness. And a couple of cheese and biscuits.
The sadness of looking at the people who've been there since 6 in the morning. No, maybe not.
Now, tell me more about your group up in the Blue Mountains. How's that going?
Fantastic. We've had 3 really great talks so far on political philosophy, and one in our sort of second group of 3 talks on reason and emotion. And there's another one coming up on the 14th. Oh, no, the 21st. No.
Sometime. What's the website?
It is blackheathphilosophy.org.au, and we're also on Facebook.
People in the Blue Mountains area might do well to check it out.
Oh, absolutely. We're across the road from the train station. It's $10, including a nice afternoon tea. And it's always a great speaker and a really interesting afternoon. And there's always plenty of time for question and answer, so everyone can get involved.
I must admit, I do have a soft spot for the Blue Mountains. I lived there for a time when I was a very young boy in Lithgow.
Oh, I'm not sure we call that the mountains.
What is it?
Well, because Lithgow is actually when you descend. Is after you make that descent down that Victoria Pass, then you're in Lithgow.
I guess you're right.
Not in the mountains.
What's that area called then? The other side.
Western New South Wales, or
really?
Yeah. It's at Bathurst.
It still snows there, you know.
Yes, it snows in Orange too, but and Oberon, but we don't call it.
That's true. And it snows where you live.
Oh, very occasionally. You actually get a lot better snow out on the Oberon Plateau than you do on the mountains. We're very lucky if we ever get snow.
Or unlucky, depending.
No, lucky. Yeah.
I agree. I like a little bit of snow every now and then.
It's so much fun. If it snowed for 6 months of the year, we'd probably hate it, but it's such a novelty and it's just beautiful. And it changes the landscape completely. It takes all the colour out of it. It's an amazing thing.
I remember it was like sort of... I was very young at the time, you understand. Well, thanks, Dan. We're always great to see you here at Sydney Skeptics in the Pub.
Always great to see you here. Always great to see you too, Richard.
Time for another drink. Well, the evening's winding down, but that's fine. I mean, a lot of people still here socialising and drinking and conversation and eating. Jessica Singer, hello.
Hi,
now
Richard.
I mean, I kicked this off many years ago, but you're the woman now who really organises it, aren't you?
I am. I have.
Step over here.
Yes, I have inherited it from you in terms of organisation, and I owe you a huge debt because you really set the standard. You did the groundwork. You year after year. Month after month, you came along from small, larger, and now it's just huge.
It was a packed house tonight. I'm very pleased about that. And now it's your job, everybody's job, but yours especially, to find speakers every month. And I guess this is a bit of a shout out to people in the Sydney area. If you have something interesting of the scientific bent to talk about, not necessarily skeptically related,
not necessarily skeptical, scientific, skeptical, just interesting, not woo. We don't like woo.
Not really, no.
We don't like woo. But we're open to all speakers, all topics, all areas. We're just interested in people who have something interesting to say. And I have to say, the people who I approach, they're so generous with their time.
Yes.
And they're so generous in agreeing to come and speak with us. It's fantastic.
It is. And look, I mean, the speech is over. Some people have left, but look at all the people just at tables.
Yeah.
They've got a beer in their hand. They're all engaged in conversation. It's exactly what I wanted to do when this was kicked off.
Exactly. It's also a social occasion.
Yes.
So the talk is one part of it. And in fact, my understanding is that you introduced the talk because as the group was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, it was difficult for newcomers to meet people, and often difficult for shy people to mix.
Yeah.
And so we introduced the talk not really as a focal point, but just as a starting point to get people mixing, get people talking, and it's actually quite interesting to see the energy in the room before the talk. Energy in the room, isn't that a woo concept? But
I know what you mean. I think the listeners know what you mean.
We're talking about the vibe.
The vibe.
The vibe in the room before the talk, when perhaps there are some newcomers, they feel a bit shy, and then after the talk, people really loosen up.
It's really nice because we've got a nice couple of newcomers over there who I spoke to before.
Yeah.
Happily engaged in conversation. It's a really nice social opportunity.
Yeah, and I suppose also after the talk, people have had a few drinks too. So we've got to...
No, really?
So, allowing for the effects of alcohol and people loosening up,
So the message is, if you're in the Sydney area and you're a scientist engaged in some interesting research, hey, contact us.
Yeah,
you can contact us at the Skeptics or the Skeptic Zone.
We would.
You never know, you might end up getting our featured speaker for the month.
We'd love to have you, and it's a great crowd. It's a really friendly crowd. They're scientifically literate.
Yes.
Yep. Really nice people, and you'll have a great night.
And you get a free dinner.
Free dinner and drinks.
Well, as the crowd dwindles, if we can wrap it up from Sydney Skeptics in the pub, I do get emails occasionally from sort of, all corners of the world asking me about setting up as Skeptics in the pub. And there's not much to say, really. Just find a nice pub or a nice venue, one that preferably has dinner if people want dinner or not. Meetup's a good way to start this process and see if you can get like-minded people to come along. Well, all I can say, in Sydney, it's been very successful.
Раз, два, три, четыре.
Друзья, меня зовут Кирилл Алферов, и я основатель общества скептиков. Мы зовем вас на наши встречи, которые проходят каждые 2 недели в Москве, и также приглашаем послушать наш подкаст, который выходит каждую неделю. Подкаст называется «Скептик», а сайт, на котором вы можете узнать о нашей деятельности, это www.skepticsociety.ru. Hey everybody, my name is Kirill, and I'm the founder of Skeptic Society Russia. Come visit us in Moscow in our bi-weekly meetings, and also listen to our weekly podcast, which is called Skeptic. And the site where you can find all of that is skepticsociety.ru.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and my everlasting thanks to those people amongst you who subscribe to the Skeptic Zone by PayPal at skepticzone.tv. Less than $1 a week. Micropayments means the show keeps going. And you can enjoy the show, of course, whether you subscribe or not. But I like to think those people who do subscribe and occasionally very generously send a little donation this way, I hope those people enjoy the show just that little bit more. In the coming week, I'm going to be very busy trying to finish off my Vaccination Chronicles documentary. I've had a string of bad luck. I've had 6 attempts now to film a certain segment of the documentary. Each time just hasn't worked out due to lighting reasons or sound reasons or camera reasons or whatever. This week, however, I'm pretty confident I'm going to wrap that part of the filming up. Maybe I'll get to show those people going to the amazing meeting in Las Vegas early next month a preview. Yeah, why not? If you're coming to the amazing meeting and you see me, come over and say hello. I'd love to meet you. I'm going to be very busy at the amazing meeting, I think, running around with Dr. Carl Kruseniski and having a chat to James Randi and all the good stuff, all the good fun stuff that goes on at TAM. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders, signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.